Hey, what's up guys, it's Modded Warfare here, welcome back to another PS5 video. So in this one, I'm finally going to show you guys how to update your firmware to a specific jailbreakable firmware, like 4.03, 4.50 or 4.51, and you can use this to update to any specific firmware that you want. But I'm going to show you guys that at the end of the video, because that's what people have been requesting. Before that, I want to give you guys a general overview of why there are so many people scattered on different firmware versions, and what the incentive is to stay on those older firmwares, and then what the incentive is to update, so that you guys can kind of weigh the two options and decide whether or not you think it's better to wait on an older firmware, like a lot of you guys have been doing so far, and whether or not you want to just update to one of the current jailbreakable firmwares that are available. So that's what we're covering here in this video, and then I'll show you guys how to update at the end if you do want to go through with that. So first of all, the main reason for staying on these older firmwares, like getting a console that's on like a 1.x firmware, 2.x firmware, or 3.x firmware, the reason is that the jailbreak on the PS5 is not complete. So we don't have what is known as a hypervisor exploit, which is what we need to turn our PS5 jailbreak into more of a full jailbreak, a complete jailbreak for the PS5, which we don't have access to right now. And the problem is, if a hypervisor exploit does release, we have no way of knowing exactly what firmware version it will release for. So it could come out for 2.50 or 3.10 or 4.03. We just don't know. So generally, the older firmware that your PS5 is on, the better chance it has of actually accessing a hypervisor exploit when it does release. And it's that simple. That is the simple reason why people do not update and why people are staying on these older firmwares. Now, on the other side, on the flip side of the argument, the pro updating side, I would probably say in that case, one of the reasons why people were staying on these older firmwares is that the jailbreak that we did have access to was only a partial jailbreak, and we could only do FTP and debug settings for the longest time. It wasn't really, worth updating. Whereas now we have the lib hijacker, which I believe Xenal Pointer and Astrelsky worked on to create that, which allows us to kind of bypass the hypervisor in a way and be able to do things that would normally require a full jailbreak in order to do. We're now able to do things like cheats and trainers, remote debugging software, mod tools. We can do PS4 fake packages, 60 FPS patches, developer menus, debug menus. We can also, of course, run our PS5 game dumps as well, and PS5 homebrew, as well as PS4 homebrew that's been updated and ported to PS5. All of that is now possible with the current jailbreak that we have from 3.0 to 4.51. So there's definitely more of an incentive to update now than there was before. The other thing is we might never get a hypervisor exploit at any point. We just don't know. There hasn't really been any hints so far towards us getting a hypervisor exploit, and we're already in the 4th year of this console's generation, which is actually kind of scary because I could have sworn the PS5 launched a few months ago. We know that Flats and Fail Overflow have, come out publicly to show that they have some kind of hypervisor exploit. However, they've not released it, and they don't seem to be showing any plans of releasing it at any point. So yeah, that's where we are right now. Now, to be clear, the 4.03, 4.51, those firmwares are not perfect either. We also have issues on those firmwares right now. DLC is not working for PS4 fake packages. There's audio crackling issues with a bunch of games. I think for PS5 and PS4 games are having this issue. Seems to be related to the PS4 fake package enabler, which is used for PS5 game dumps and PS4 game dumps. We also have a lot of game dumps for the PS5 that are not working right now and that require manual patching. We have certain games that can't even be decrypted or turned into game dumps yet, like Demon's Souls and Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. We need a better decryption payload. And then we also have the problem that PS5 games, we can only get game dumps of games that work up to firmware 5.0. Any games that came out that require a higher firmware than 4.51 cannot be dumped because they cannot be run on the console in order to dump it. And then we can't get game dumps for those newer games. And that's about it. So yeah, so those are the issues at the moment. So it's not perfect by any means. That is kind of the dilemma that you're in right now. Do you want to update from a firmware that can't even access the jailbreak at all right now in the hope that you'll get a hypervisor exploit at some point? Or do you want to just jump on the current jailbreak that we have right now? And there's quite a lot of stuff that we can do at this point with the current jailbreak. So again, I'm not trying to make a decision for you guys. You make your own mind up on whether or not you want to update. Definitely ask some other people in the scene and get their opinions. But that's where we are right now. So if you were wanting to update, what firmware would I recommend updating to? Well, in that case, if you're dead set on updating, then I would say probably either 4.03 or 4.51. I would personally steer towards 4.03. However, 4.51 might make sense if you are only caring about game dumps, because of course all the game dumps that are made that actually work will work on 4.51 because that's the highest firmware that games are being dumped on and updates are being dumped on, whereas older firmwares that can access the jailbreak might not be able to run certain game updates and games that were dumped on 4.51 if it requires that firmware in order to run them. They might have to be backported to work on those older firmwares that are also jailbreakable, like 3.x and even 4.03 to some extent. Although 4.03 is pretty good, it's very similar to 4.51, so you can usually run most of the games that you can run on 4.51 on 4.03. There just might be a few that don't work right now and that might require backporting. But the reason why I would say 4.03 might be the better firmware is because most of the developers that are actually releasing stuff for the scene, the ones that actually matter, the people who are actually making stuff available, those developers tend to be on 4.03. So people like Lightning Mods is on 4.03, who's behind ETA Hen and Items Flow and the Homebrew Store. And then you've also got Slayer's Govey, who was behind the release of the PS4 Fake Package Enabler, without which we wouldn't be able to do any of the stuff we're doing right now. He's also on 4.03, and that's why 4.03 is the first firmware to get support for stuff. Now, last but not least, there are people on 3.x who are considering updating to maybe 4.03 or 4.51. I can understand that because you've had to wait a really long time for things like ETA Hen and the PS4 Fake Package Enabler to get ported. It's taken months. Although if you've waited that long, now that you have support for those things, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to update now because you already have access to ETA Hen and the Fake Package Enabler, and any new updates to those things should automatically support your firmware now. So we already have all the offsets for your firmware versions, so any new updates for those things, you should get support. It's only if something brand new comes out that's completely radically different to the stuff we're using right now that requires offsets to be ported for those other firmware versions. Otherwise, you should be good going forward, hopefully. Hopefully the days of having to wait multiple months for your firmware to get support are over. Fingers crossed anyway. But the issue with being on a 3.x firmware now is really due to the backports, with game dumps not working for PS5 games, needing to be backported, games that were dumped on 4.03, 4.50, 4.51, not working on a 3.x firmware because it needs to be manually backported, and that process could take a while. So yeah, there's definitely, still reasons why you might want to update from a 3.x firmware to 4.03, 4.50 or 4.51. So hopefully that gives you a good overview of the general situation. What I'm going to do now though is show you guys how you can update to a specific firmware version on your PS5. So if you want to update to 4.03 you can, or 4.51 or any of the jailbreakable firmwares, you can pick which firmware you want to update to and you can update to that firmware. So the way that we do this is more or less the same as the PS4. You just need a USB drive or external hard drive, plug that into your computer, and then on your computer you're going to want to go to either darksoftware.xyz, and then you can go to the PS5 firmware list. Link will be in the description, and then you can scroll down, make sure you check the retail firmwares. That's the firmwares you need to be looking for. So you go to retail firmwares, and then you scroll down and you'll find 4.03 right here, 4.50 and 4.51. So you can download any one of those. And of course, the jailbreak itself supports all the way from 3.0 to, 4.51 right here. So all of these ones that are highlighted are jailbreakable. So if you're on a 2-point-something firmware and you've decided I'm going to update to a jailbreakable firmware, but I want to update to the lowest jailbreakable firmware so that I'm still on an older firmware, then you could update to like 3.0 and you still have access to the jailbreak while still remaining on a pretty low firmware. But obviously, if the hypervisor's changed from 2.50 to 3.0, which it seems like that might be when it actually changed, then you're potentially sacrificing a hypervisor vulnerability by updating. But yeah, anyway, if you decide to update, those are the firmwares that are supported. There's also this website here that you can go to. I'll leave this one in the description. So you just go to PS5 and you've got official firmwares, and then you just go to the next page, and you'll find there's 4.03, 4.50, 4.51, and you've got 3.10 all the way up to 4.51. And then on the next page, you also have 3.0, which is jailbreakable. So you can download any one of those firmwares. So once you've got the firmware downloaded, it will come as a PS5 update.pup file. What you want to do is put that on a USB or external hard drive. Make sure the USB stick or external hard drive is formatted in exFAT or FAT32 format. So right click and go to properties. Make sure the drive file system says exFAT or FAT32. And then from there, we're going to go into the USB and we need to create a bunch of folders on the root of the USB stick. So the first folder, we're going to create a new folder in the root of the USB called PS5 in uppercase characters. And then inside that folder, we create another folder called update, also in uppercase characters. And then inside that folder, you copy the update file inside. So we copy the update file in that folder. Now you also want to go to view and go to show and then file name extensions. Make sure that's ticked so that you can actually see the file type showing up, the extension .pup. And you also want to rename the file to make sure it's called PS5 update.pup. There was a space before the extension there for people who don't have file name extensions showing so that you'll actually see the .pup there. But yeah, you need to make sure it's named PS5 update.pup because a lot of the places you download it from will change the file name slightly. So make sure you rename it so it's PS5 update.pup in uppercase characters and make sure you have file name extensions showing. So from here, we can go ahead and eject the drive and plug it in to our PS5. Okay, so once you're on the PS5, you're going to head over to settings, go to network and make sure that you disconnect from the internet. So make sure the connect to internet box is unchecked. That's very important because you don't want it to install or download an update from the internet and then you think you're installing the one from the USB drive and it actually installs the newer one from the internet because it's more likely to favor the latest update. Whatever the highest update is, it will want to install that one, which will be one from the internet and not the correct one that's on your USB. So make sure you do that. Also check your downloads. If you have a downloads icon showing up here, then there's something in there. Check to make sure you don't have a system software update that is trying to be downloaded. If there is one in there, make sure that you delete it. Now, if the update has already downloaded to the console, you will not have the option to delete it. You'll only have the option to update. So what you need to do in that situation, if you're on a jailbreakable firmware already, you can run the jailbreak and load the ETA-hen payload. That will delete the system software update. It will still show up in your downloads, but if you turn off the internet and restart the PS5, when it reboots, you'll notice that the update should be gone from your downloads because it has been deleted. However, if you're not on a jailbreakable firmware yet, you will not have that option. I think the only option to get rid of it in that scenario is to reset the PS5, which will unfortunately delete all of the files that are currently on your PS5. All of your data and stuff will be wiped, but it will also get rid of the update. Make sure you're disconnected from the internet before you reset it, and then that way it's not able to download the update again after it restarts. So yeah, that's what you need to do. That'll get rid of the update. That way there's no chance of it accidentally trying to install, or well, maybe deliberately in its case, trying to install the latest firmware instead of the one that's on your USB drive. Generally, because you're selecting the option to install from a USB drive, it should only install the one that is on the USB anyway, even if you do have a system software update downloaded to the console. But you probably don't want to take that risk, so it's best to just try and get rid of that update that's already been downloaded before installing the one from the USB drive. So from there, you can head down to System in the System Settings, and then you can go to System Software Update and Settings. You go in here, you go to Update System Software, and then you make sure you say Update from USB drive, not from the internet. So Update from USB drive. Now in my case, you already have the latest system software, because I have 4.03 and I downloaded 4.03. So I already have the same update that's on the USB stick installed. So it's going to tell me I'm already on the latest version. But in your case, it should say there's a valid update found and it will allow you to install it. And you just click OK, go through the normal update process. And then once the update or once the console reboots, you then want to head back into the settings and go to console information to check if it's been updated correctly and that you have your firmware version. So after the dash, so 21.02, doesn't matter what it says there, the 21.02, yours might be different, That's not important. After the dash, you have your firmware version. So that's 04.03. That's 4.03 right there. So you just want to make sure that that you've got the correct firmware version that you installed from the USB now showing up there. A second option is to install from the USB drive when in safe mode. So you can also update from safe mode. You can boot the console into safe mode by holding down the power button and keeping it held down until you hear it beep a second time. Once you hear the second beep, it will boot you into safe mode. And then from there, you just need to plug in the controller with the charge cable to the console. And then you can enter the safe mode options and then find the one for system software update. Select that option and then choose the option to update from a USB and let it detect the update on the USB. And if it detects it, it can then install it from there. You shouldn't lose any of your stuff because we're not installing a recovery firmware, which would wipe the hard drive. In this case, it's just a normal firmware update. So all of your files and stuff will remain. So anyway, that is how you can update to a specific firmware version if you've decided that you just want to have access to what we have access to right now with the current partial jailbreak with libhijacker, access cheats, trainers, game dumps, all of that stuff. The whole idea was just to give you guys a general overview of the situation and let you know how to update your firmware if you do choose to go down that route, even though it's not the recommended route at this moment. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this video or found the information useful. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll hopefully see you guys once again in the next video.